Good afternoon, and welcome to the new October 2020 Silent Hill tool-assisted speedrun by Andyrion. It's a fine day for the occasion. October 31st, Hallows Eve. Grab your cozy blankets, get ready for some spooks, and some fast-paced speedrunning. If you would like to watch this run without my commentary, a link to the raw TASs is in the description. If you've never played Silent Hill before and you want to experience this amazing game for yourself, I highly recommend you do so. While cutscenes will be skipped and I won't be going into the story, stuff like bosses and the areas of the game will be seen. So consider this a spoiler alert for everything that's about to follow. Without further ado, let's get to it. As some of you may know, Silent Hill stars our protagonist, Harry Mason, who has to find and rescue his daughter Cheryl, who's wandered off into the town.
Cheryl? Is that Cheryl? Where are you going? Hey, wait! Stop!
Our very first optimization comes in when we enter the cutscene from an angle that doesn't seem optimal at first. By running to the corner of the curb, Harry will run into the alleyway further in a small cutscene. You can actually start the cutscene earlier by going straight to the grass on the left, but Harry won't run as far into the alleyway if you do it that way. Since this game goes by in-game time, all cutscenes where you're not in control, full motion videos, and loading screens do not count for the in-game time. All areas of movement and menuing count for the in-game time, and will be displayed at the very end when the game is beaten. You can go ahead and try to guess the final in-game time for the TASs in the comments. I can tell you that the any % world record is 29:57 by Aaron, so you can try to guess from there. As we approach the alleyway with the horrifying creature on the wall, our objective is actually to die as fast as possible. This is a scripted sequence, and in regular any % runs, this can be a bit of a run killer. You're hoping that one of the Grey Children enemies grabs you, and that the other one stabs you, which Andyrion manipulated the enemies to do in this fight, to die as soon as possible. We will dive further into enemy manipulation as the run goes on. With that opening sequence done, we enter the cafe. In the cafe, we're going to be picking up the flashlight, the map, and the knife. You cannot leave the cafe without these items, so we have to pick them up. A cutscene was played before gaining control of Harry again after we fainted in the alleyway. These are skippable, but this is where Sybil gives us our gun. We will be equipping the gun for the fight against the air screamer.
What's going on with that radio?
This air screamer has a random HP value set between 280 to 480 on the easy difficulty. Every pistol shot deals 100 damage, meaning that under normal circumstances you only have a 10% chance of killing this enemy in 3 shots. This fight was however RNG manipulated to eliminate the bad odds. As we step into the town of Silent Hill once more, our next objective according to the game is to go back to the alleyway that we passed out in. A note from Cheryl in the alleyway tells us to go to the Midwich Elementary school. The roads to the school are all blocked off, and the only other way through is a door requiring 3 keys. You aren't required to read Cheryl's note in the alleyway to progress, meaning we can go straight for the keys, making our objective easy when you know where they are. One of the keys is right here, just outside of the cafe, and a turn into the alleyway. The other 2 keys are fairly straightforward to get to, so I'll begin to explain one of the most important things when speedrunning this game: movement. It may not be obvious at first, but mastering this game's tank controls is tougher than it looks. So far, we've only really seen movement in big open spaces, but later on when we get to more claustrophobic areas, it will start to get more difficult. There will be times when it's faster to walk, because your turn speed is faster. There will be times where strafing using the shoulder buttons is faster, and even running full speed into a wall while turning can seem like the slower option, but it's quicker than all of the above. This game can best be described as a momentum-based survival horror game. Harry doesn't go to a full stop when he stops running. He needs time to decelerate, and it can make navigating the tighter areas of the game pretty rough at times. We'll touch more upon that later. Another thing I mentioned in the cafe is that we're playing on easy. Most games with a difficulty setting will have its any percent run played on the easiest difficulty, because it's the fastest. The biggest change is that easy gives you twice the ammo from a pickup over normal and hard, meaning you have to pick up less ammo in the run overall. Some enemies and bosses have more health on normal and hard, but some stay the same across all 3 difficulties. Bosses tend to also be more aggressive on normal and hard, which can cause some variance in the strategies you use. The order in which you get through the game, however, remains the same across all 3 difficulties. While we didn't have to read Cheryl's note in the alleyway to progress, there is a note on the ground we have to read to progress, and it's coming up in about 40 seconds. It will tell us that there's a key on the inside of a doghouse that we need to use to get through the front door. The key doesn't actually spawn unless you read the note, so it's required. If you go up to the doghouse without reading the note first, you'll get the ironic, probably a doghouse, though I'm not sure, since there's no dog around line. The doghouse key is also not to be confused with the other 3 keys that we picked up. The other 3 keys are commonly referred to as keys for Eclipse, since the door with the 3 locks on it has a map next to it with those exact words written on it. The map also shows you the location of the keys for Eclipse, so clearly you're meant to get inside the house before collecting them, but this out of order sequence is much faster, and that's why it's done this way. Now that we've read the note, let's go to the doghouse and progress to the school. With the world turning dark around us, now is probably a good time to talk about the enemy behavior in this game. Enemies in Silent Hill can react and aggro based on a few things. Some enemies can aggro simply from hearing your footsteps, but most will react to the flashlight. While it will not be done on the way to the school, you can turn your flashlight off using the circle button. This will make enemies not see you or aggro onto you much later, allowing you to run past them. This is something you're already going to be seeing in the school, since the corridors and rooms are going to be much smaller, giving you less room to dodge around the enemies. The grey children enemies you saw in the alleyway at the start will be seen in the school again, and their behavior can be manipulated to do exactly what we want them to do, using precise movements and turning the flashlight on and off. A lot of these manipulation techniques are essentially TAS only. If you try to copy what the TAS does, the enemy position or the facing angle might be different in your playthrough of the game. Since a TASer has save states at their disposal in the creation phase of the TAS, he will know exactly where the enemies are, what they will do, and how to manipulate them. In the upcoming courtyard, you can see the first instance of turning the light off to avoid enemy aggro, making your path forward perfectly straight. The enemy in the next room is manipulated to stab and miss for the best possible line. Our first objective in the school is to get a gold and a silver medallion that we can put into 2 empty slots in the courtyard to enter the clock tower. We're going to be heading to the second floor's lab equipment room to grab a bottle with chemicals in it. In the room next door, we'll pour the chemicals on a hand that is tightly gripping the gold medallion. Sounds to me like the medallion should have melted as well, but I'm no chemist, so moving on. For whatever reason, we cannot go to the puzzle room for the silver medallion right away. We have to go back out to the courtyard and put the gold medallion in the correct slot to progress. You may have been noticing that Andyrion is not facing straight forward when going against most of the doors. This is because Harry will do a faceplant animation against the door if he's been running for more than 8 steps. If Harry runs towards a door for less than 8 steps, the game will force him into a walk for whatever reason. Both of these animations are slow, and can be avoided by approaching doors at an angle. Unfortunately, not all doors are the same, forcing you to memorize them all and learn through trial and error. Now we head to the infamous piano puzzle. If we didn't put the gold medallion in the slot next to the clock tower, the piano would be closed, and we wouldn't be able to do the puzzle. This puzzle is probably the most confusing when you're playing casually, but you essentially have to press all the keys that don't make a sound in the correct order. When done correctly, the silver medallion slides itself loose above the chalkboard, and we can collect it. One thing you probably would have never known unless I told you, is that on puzzles like the one you just saw that have a cursor, the cursor moves significantly faster when using the analog stick rather than the D-pad. This is done on a handful of puzzles in the game, and it's just a weird quirk nobody's sure on why it is the way it is. Now that we have both of the medallions, we have one more task to do before we can enter the clock tower. We need to head to the basement to turn on the generator. If we try to enter the clock tower without turning it on, the door just says it's locked. Another area where the task gains a lot more time over regular any % runs is when Harry is turning. In BizHawk, which is the emulator that this task was done on, you can input any value in the X and Y axis between 0 and 255. If we pick a random value, let's say 65, this would equate to a human slightly tilting the stick to get perfect turns. With analog sticks on controllers wearing out and the preciseness of these values, the task will inevitably gain extra frames on a human player. As we enter the clock tower, I just want to point out that this was one of, if not the first horror game I ever played. The school scared me so much with its claustrophobic atmosphere and excellent sound design that brings a lot of tension. But coming out on the other side of the clock tower is when I really started to shake. Welcome to the Nightmare School, where everything you just familiarized yourself with has been turned upside down. This picture card is our first key moving forward. It will be used in about 15 seconds inside a room that you may recognize from the intro of this video. Yeah, thanks for the shotgun. Moving further into the Nightmare School, we're going to get a creepy phone call in a second. Now I know you're already spooked from before, so I can at least comfort you and say that the phone cutscene will be skipped. Our next objective is to grab a rubber ball inside of the Nightmare School's storage room. This will be needed for a puzzle on the roof. If it wasn't already obvious, Andyrion has been using quick turns inside of these one-dimensional rooms once an item has been acquired. This is done by hitting both L1 and R1 at the same time to turn Harry around 180 degrees. This is the fastest option to get out of straightforward rooms where the item is usually right in front of you in a straight line. Even though we already know the solution to this puzzle, you cannot turn the valve unless you inspect the key in the hole first. Since menuing does count for in-game time, we want to open the menu in this run as little as possible. So we go over to the spot where we clog up the hole with the rubber ball, equip the shotgun first, then use the rubber ball. Now we turn the valve, and the key will be flushed down into the courtyard. If you've never seen a Silent Hill speedrun and this is your first time watching one, you're probably thinking to yourself that you shouldn't be expecting any glitches in this run. While it is true that there haven't been any glitches so far, there will be two major glitches later on in the run. The first one saving a bit over a minute, and the second one saving around 30 seconds. The first glitch that saves a bit over a minute is actually only around 2.5 years old. I'll go into further detail once we're there. But for now, we got a bit to go until then. The only thing you're really going to see in the next 30 seconds is our first shotgun shell pickup. So I'll talk a bit more about this game and how it impressed me playing it for the first time 18 years after it came out. One aspect I thoroughly enjoy about Silent Hill is that it manages to give you a sense of feeling unnerved or on edge, despite there technically being nothing to fear. I felt scared for most of my first playthrough, but despite that, I kept going to see what happened next in the story. I think the game is really ahead of its time on that front, letting the game's world speak for itself without the need of any jump scares. Except for that one. Now that we have everything we need, we're going to be heading to the final puzzle of the Nightmare School, which is followed by our first boss battle against Splithead. The way you're going to see the TAS fight the boss is very different from human any % runs, due to the TAS method costing far more ammo than the regular method, and just not being consistent. The boss has two phases to the fight. In the first phase, the boss slowly chases after you and the goal is simply to deal enough damage until it reaches the second phase. In the second phase, Splithead opens his mouth where you fire 2 more shots into his weak point, and the fight concludes. Even though we only have to fire 3 shotgun shells to open his mouth, he can still take damage in the transitioning phase between phase 1 and 2. So in the TAS method, we chip away at his health during the transitioning phase, firing 10 shotgun shells at the boss, and when he opens his mouth, it only takes 1 more shot to defeat him. This method saves a mere 0.6 seconds, and is essentially TAS only. But 0.6 is 0.6 in the mind of a TASer. One more thing you're going to see in the fight is the use of dropping the aim to avoid the reload animation of the shotgun. So as the fight starts, we're just going to pump all of our ammo into Splithead. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Drop the aim. 7, 8, 9, 10. 1. Now, while all of that was very impressive, the real optimization is the seizure Harry is having after the fight is over. If you look closely at Harry's head, it's almost as if he is becoming the Splithead. Hear that church bell? Well, that's our next destination. The Balkan Church. If it's your first time watching this game as well, you might be wondering what the stuff flying out of the sky is. Most people's first initial thought is that it's ash or snow. It seems most intuitive that it's ash, because if it was snow, you would see more of it lying around on the ground. But contrary to what you may believe, it is indeed snow. This can best be proven if you stop Harry from a full run. He will go into an idle animation where he's panting, where you can see his frosty breath being exhaled. You might also have a question about the fog in the distance. Why is it there? In order for Silent Hill to run well in the original PlayStation, the game designers intentionally lowered your render distance to only see what's shortly in front of you. While this may seem like hardware limitations on first glance that would ultimately hinder the experience, it actually helps the game significantly in making you feel boxed in, despite you technically being out in the open on the streets. This upcoming alleyway was actually one of the most difficult areas of the game to TASs. The air screamers here are very prone to hit you, and it was quite difficult for Andyrion to manipulate them all to not hit you while simultaneously taking the most optimal line. Here in the church, we're going to be picking up the Flauros and the drawbridge key. It's unfortunate we're not here for very long, since the church song is a fan favorite. Before we picked up the two items in the church, we met with Dahlia Gillespie in a cutscene that we skipped. I've chosen to ignore explaining the story, since I reckon half of you watching already know, and I'd rather leave the story unexplained for the other half that haven't played the game yet. I highly recommend trying to piece everything together yourself if you plan on playing this game for the first time after watching this video. Coming up is possibly the most infamous little stretch of movement that causes pain and agony to all who run this game. The Orridge Bridge control room. Not only is this turn around the stairs really painful, but once inside the control room, the frame rate can drop to as low as single digits, making it really hard to control Harry. It may seem counterintuitive to rub against the railing for so long to make it up the stairs, but Andyrion found the method to be the fastest. In regular any percent runs, players usually opt for walking around the stairs, since your turn speed is slightly faster. Now that we've unlocked the second part of Silent Hill, we're going to make our way to the Alchemilla Hospital down south. I hope you're all enjoying this video so far. It's not my usual style of video, but I wanted to make something special and spooky for Halloween that still revolved around speedrunning. If you guys like these one-off Halloween speedrun specials though, maybe next year we can cover Silent Hill 2. In the hospital, we first head to a room where we get a cutscene with Kaufman, who is another new character that I won't go into detail on for reasons explained earlier. What follows is arguably the most awkward room in the entire game to TASs, which is the conference room. The key is on the other side of the table, and navigating around it requires a tiny walk to get your facing angle just right to grab it. Now we're going to head to the kitchen to grab a plastic bottle. And if you played this game before, you may be wondering why we're getting this item. It's optional, right? Well, you would be correct on that assumption. Getting the bottle and filling it up with the red liquid is something you have to do to get a different ending in this game. While it may be intuitive to assume that the worst ending is the fastest, the red liquid is going to play an integral part in a time-saving glitch later on that will result in a better ending. This also brings me to something I haven't mentioned yet, which is how many different endings there are. Silent Hill has 5 endings: bad minus, bad plus, good minus, good plus, and UFO ending. To get the good ending, you have to do the Kaufman side quest later on in the game. To get the bad ending, you simply ignore doing this. What causes you to get either minus or plus on your ending depends on whether or not you use the red liquid to instantly defeat a boss later in the game. The UFO ending is kind of a meme New Game Plus ending I won't go into detail about. Out of all the endings, we're going to be aiming for the bad plus ending. You're probably thinking that taking out a boss instantly with the help of the red liquid is faster, and that's why we do it, right? Well, all I can say is stay tuned. Meanwhile, we just check the second and third floor's main entrance door, both of which happen to be locked, and are triggers to make a mysterious fourth floor appear. This is where we enter the Nightmare Hospital, probably the hardest area in the run to optimize well. Our first step in progressing for this opening part of the Nightmare Hospital is to get past a door that requires 4 differently colored slabs so we can solve a riddle. Here's our first. And a loud bang for good measure. Next, we're gonna pick up the blood pack. It's actually going to be traded to Count Dracula for one of the slabs later on. Here's the yellow slab, and that's actually all of the slabs on this floor. So we're going to head to the elevator and grab our next one on the first floor. This room is ever so slightly faster to do in strafe, since you end up facing the slab immediately. Strafing is not faster when you have to go far into the room, because strafing is slower than running when you're going in a straight line with it. That's all for this floor. Now we're going to take the stairs to the second floor, where we will pick up a lighter before progressing. Now we will trade the blood pack with the Count for the final slab. Okay, I was actually lying about the whole Count Dracula thing, but this very nice tentacle monster will let us get our final slab in trade for some blood. What's funny is, in order to get the blood pack in this room as early as possible, you have to move forward for exactly 1 frame. If you try to use the blood pack from a standstill, the game will determine you to be too far away from the tentacle monster. Now that we have all the slabs, we're going to place them in the correct slots because we're cheaters, and we already know the solution to the puzzle. After this puzzle, we have a hallway coming up that happens to be one of 2 rooms in the game where you have to fight one of the enemies, because it's impossible to dodge and is blocking our path. Often referred to as the nurse push. We're going to shoot the nurse with 2 shotgun shells, push her back and get through the door nicely. If she doesn't get pushed far enough back, she can fall in front of the door, making it inaccessible for a few seconds, which can happen a lot in regular any % runs. Now we got the basement storeroom key, and we're gonna go ahead and grab some disinfecting alcohol in the next room, and head to the basement. In the basement storeroom, more strafing will be used to navigate this room since it's faster. It doesn't look very hard to do, but nobody does this in regular any % runs, which is a testament to how difficult it is. I really like this next cutscene coming up. It looks like it's running at some absurdly high uncapped frame rate, but I think it's just us being used to the unstable and low frame rate this game runs at. Anywho, we're going to burn through the vines on the floor and head into the spooky basement.
What's this?
The only thing we need from the basement is this key, but you can also find an optional VHS tape in one of the rooms that explains some extra info about the story. We're going to pick up our second and final set of shotgun shells. Once again, you aren't required to pick up that much ammo throughout the run, since we get 12 shells from being on easy. If we were on normal or hard, it would only be 6. With the final key in the basement picked up and used, we have now finished the Nightmare Hospital. We skip a pretty lengthy cutscene where we meet with Lisa for the first time, Then Dahlia comes in, says some gibberish, and leaves a key on the table. This is the key for the antique shop, and this is where the run takes a massive turn. We're about to perform our first major glitch of the run. Around April of 2018, runner Orifine discovered an out of bounds in Silent Hill by the Lighthouse, which is an area that we've not been to yet. The practicality of the Lighthouse out of bounds was unfortunately useless, but the way it was done could be applied to other areas. This prompted another runner, Aaron, to investigate further and try the method at the antique shop. This resulted in a massive out of bounds that skips a lot of running and the twin feeler boss fight, saving a bit over a minute. The skip involves a new type of enemy we haven't seen yet, called a romper. Their only attack is to jump on Harry, knocking him down while biting him. This attack is essential in performing the skip. We're gonna head to the antique shop, skip some cutscenes, and when we come back out, the town of Silent Hill will be turned nightmarish, just like the previous areas. Once the town is in this state, we need to aim our flashlight at the romper just outside of the antique shop, then run back to the very edge of the antique shop loading zone and have the romper jump on our back. When Harry gets knocked down by a romper, the game tries to correct his position on the floor, usually involving in a small slide forwards. The goal of the trick is to have Harry slide into the loading zone of the antique shop while being knocked down by the romper. If done correctly, Harry's collision will be messed up, allowing him to run through walls. While it may appear that Harry is running through the wall, he's actually zipped upwards to run on top of the game world. After clipping out of bounds, the rooftop near the hospital with the Floatstinger boss fight just so happens to be located directly in front of the antique shop hallway, so if we just proceed to run in a straight line, we'll get to the roof eventually. In order for you to better understand this skip, I will put up a map of the game world as if it was seen from above once we do the skip. One quick note is that each individual area in Silent Hill isn't necessarily located where they appear in-game. As you'll see on the map in just a second, the antique shop hallway is all the way at the bottom right part of the map, while the main town of Silent Hill is far north. Aggro the romper, run back, he jumps, and now we're clipped. The screen will go black for a while here because Harry zips to the top of the map, and the camera hasn't quite caught up to us yet. The way you know whether or not you get the skip is if you hear the crunching noise once you're on the other side of the loading zone. The romper behavior is also extremely random. Sometimes he won't see you at all, sometimes he loses interest halfway through, and sometimes he can just be slow, and of course the fastest pattern was RNG manipulated in this TASs. The TASs actually takes the time save here one step further. It's very normal for regular any % runs to drop down on the roof and go to the stairs to trigger the loading zone. But in the TASs, you can actually hit the loading zone for the stairs well above the roof, as you just saw, saving more time. We need to head back to the hospital one more time for our cutscene with Lisa, and then we can move on to the boss fight against Floatstinger. This boss has 4000 HP on every difficulty of the game. It's uncertain why the developers left the health the same across all 3 difficulties, but it could be due to the boss fight's special properties in regards to taking damage. When you shoot Floatstinger, it starts a 3-second timer before the next shot deals maximum damage again. This means as long as you shoot within those 3 seconds, you aren't losing time. If you manage to shoot perfectly at every 3rd second, you can kill him in 8 shots, which is done perfectly in the TASs. Another small optimization done is getting to the stairs as you kill the boss to shorten your distance to your next destination. Another thing I never had time to explain until now is that because we did the out of bounds and we skipped the twin feeler boss fight, we also happened to skip the hunting rifle. With the out of bounds being found, it now meant that you basically have to fight every boss with the shotgun. Luckily, the shotgun is pretty easy to use on the final boss as well, with its great fire rate, so runners adjusted to this change quickly. In the story, it's said that Cheryl was headed for the lake. Our only option to the lake is through the sewer, which will be the next area. It's not going to be as mazy as the school or the hospital, but it will demand harder enemy dodging. In the sewer, there is a new type of enemy, the Hanged Scratcher. You're once again going to see a lot of RNG manipulation by turning the flashlight off to get the enemies out of our way. It's very standard to get hit or blocked here at least once or twice in a regular any percent run, but as we know it, whoever this TASs guy is, he's pretty good. Manipulating all the scratchers as well as the roaches on the floor sometimes took a lot of trial and error. As we're running through the sewer, I highly suggest that you all go to Andyrion's Twitch channel and drop him a follow. His Twitch channel is twitch.tv/Andyrion. He's actually top 3 in multiple categories in Silent Hill, and also runs Silent Hill 4. His streams are both in English and Brazilian Portuguese. He's very charismatic, kind, and smiles a lot, despite playing absolutely terrifying games. Since there's not much else that's going to happen besides RNG manipulation, I'm going to list off some of the cooler Easter eggs that this game has hidden. Near the area of the Balkan Church, you can find a roller door with some big red text written in blood that says Red Room on it, which is a reference to the movie The Shining. There's actually plenty of other Stephen King references spread throughout this game, such as a poster in the cafe at the start that reads "Study, damn it," which is something Stephen King put into his school newspaper when he was in college. Throughout the game, there are many small references to companies and brands that they clearly didn't get the permission to use. In the Orange Bridge control room, there's a Playboy magazine on the desk. There's a convenience store that has heavy similarities to the 7-Eleven logo, but they replaced the 7 with an 8. There's also a knockoff FedEx brand inside the Indian Runner, which is a building only accessible with the Kaufman side quest. Well, they called it FedEx. Yeah, I don't know about that one. The Midwich Elementary School has many of its backgrounds, posters, and cabinets ripped straight from, you wouldn't believe it, Kindergarten Cop, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Last but not least is a newspaper box you can find, with the headline being Bill Skins 5th, which is a reference to Silence of the Lambs. Great movie, by the way. Now we're going to head to what I can best describe as a forced encounter with a bunch of enemies. Luckily for us, the enemies have the reaction time of a sloth, and won't even bother chasing after us. Loud Bang number 2, the sequel is not as good as the first, we all know that. We're coming up to the end of the sewer, and this is where we see a different area of Silent Hill altogether, the resort area. The game is going to start getting pretty laggy, presumably because the amount of enemies loaded all at once is steadily rising as we near the end game. Another thing I haven't exactly touched upon because it's not really an issue for the TASs, but it's a pretty big issue for regular any percent runs, is something called wide turns. A wide turn happens if you hold up left or up right when entering a room. The game will sometimes prioritize the forward input when loading into a room, resulting in a very wide swerve, losing you maybe slightly less than half a second every time it happens. In a game this optimized, this sort of stuff can add up. The only safe way to avoid wide turns is to hold left or right as the room loads in, then adding the forward input after Harry has turned a bit. You might lose a few frames by turning when standing still, but it's all about weighing risk versus reward. Some rooms seem more susceptible to wide turns than others, and it's not exactly understood why. This issue is of course not something you're going to see in the TASs unless it's faster to wide turn on purpose. Once more, the world around us has gone corrupt, and I really like the atmosphere and the tension during this part of the game. One of the enemy dogs is going to lunge at us in just a second, and what's weird is, if you keep the flashlight off for most of this little bit, the dog won't spawn on console sometimes, but on emulator he is seemingly impossible to despawn. The next section of movement can be pretty chokeable if you're on good pace. Getting on the planks across the water quickly can be tricky, but what's worse is probably the stairs. The frame rate doesn't help trying to perform tight movement at all, and even casually, it's just not worth it to fight the enemies here. You have almost no room to fight and there's just too many. You lose more than what you gain by fighting them. Now entering the Lighthouse, this is one of the most awkward rooms in the entire game to do fast. The tank controls don't complement the spiral staircase whatsoever, so in order to have Harry not run face first into a wall, a couple of walking steps are required to get himself facing right. Speedrunning was not on Konami's mind when designing this room. When we got to the boat for the first time, Dahlia and Sybil were there, and Dahlia told us to go to the Lighthouse, while Sybil went to the amusement park. Sybil was supposed to come back to the boat after we went to the Lighthouse, so now we have to chase her down in the amusement park. We're going to be heading back to the sewer, since it's believed that that's where Sybil went to get to the amusement park. Most areas in this game have its scare factor and overall spooky atmosphere removed because we're speedrunning it all, but I believe that the most unnerving experience through the second sewer is actually to run through it guns blazing like we're doing. After the second sewer, we're going to be coming up to the amusement park, where we will be performing our second major glitch of the run. At the end of the amusement park, there is a boss fight with a possessed Sybil. You can either choose to kill her, or use the red liquid that we picked up in the hospital to extract the demon out of her and win the fight instantly. The red liquid can also be used on either the Grey Children or a new enemy, the Larval Stalker. When used on these enemies, you get a glitched cutscene of Harry using the red liquid on Sybil. This is because you're not meant to use the red liquid on anyone else other than Sybil, but it's believed that the enemies in the amusement park share some kind of property with Sybil, making you able to use it on them as well. We're going to use the red liquid on the first enemy we encounter in the amusement park, which skips running over to Sybil, and the boss fight itself. It's estimated to save around 30 seconds. This glitch was actually patched on the European PAL version of the game, and revisions of the Japanese NTSC-J version of the game. A bunch of cutscenes later, we're now taken to nowhere, the final area of the game. The end goal to get to the final boss is to get 5 artifacts that will be placed on a door, but we have a lot to go in this area until we get there. First, we're gonna head to the basement to pick up a screwdriver and some pliers. We're going to be using the pliers to get this key, and the hitbox for this is actually deceivingly small. You have to get pretty close to the pipe to use the pliers, otherwise the game will tell you that you can't use it here. Once again, we know the solution to this puzzle, so we're cheating a little. A picture is shown above the keypad, and we have to put in the number that corresponds to the amount of limbs shown in the picture. The same applies for the next puzzle. We know the solution, but this one looks way cooler. Check it out. In case you blinked from the ultra-satisfying cursor movement, the answer to the puzzle was alert, and in contrast to the pipe, this time the hitboxes for all the letters are fairly large. Here's our first artifact out of the 5 that we need. We're gonna get a cutscene now with one of the best songs in the game. Unfortunately, we won't get to hear much of it. We're gonna place our stone of time that we got earlier in the empty slot below, and we get a key for our troubles. After this, we're going to go to the top floor to do a puzzle that shows off more of the tool-assisted cursor movement, which is great. We've also skipped getting the camera on the bottom floor. It's an item you need to use to find the solution to the puzzle on the top floor, but if you memorize it, you don't need to grab it. As I said, if you enjoyed the previous puzzle's cursor movement, there will be more right now. Let's all pray that YouTube doesn't age restrict my video after that puzzle. We get the birdcage key and dip to the second floor. Here we have yet another nurse blocking our path, and just like the previous, a quick pop, pop, and that's taken care of. While we pick up another artifact and a ring in this room, I want to mention quickly that some of the enemies can fall down on the ground and not be fully dead, sometimes requiring a kick to fully take them out. If they're dead, you can pass through them as you just saw Harry do, but if the enemy is alive, it will continue to have collision, which can get you stuck for a long time. We're gonna use the birdcage key here just to get another key. This room just basically sums up the whole game. Now we will enter the area that looked like the basement from the hospital, and we're gonna enter the beginner's trap room. We're gonna take the dagger from the closet, which is now 3 out of the 5 artifacts. Then we're gonna tie this chain together with a ring. If you don't, there's a tentacle monster that will instantly kill you. After this cutscene, there's a strafe out of the room that is really hard, and you essentially only have 2 or 3 frames to exit to make it faster. Can you guess what we get once we spill the beans? Why yes, a key. In the room across, we're gonna pick up the Ankh, our 4th artifact. And strafing out of this room is also another minor optimization, saving approximately 5 or 6 frames. We're gonna turn the power generator off and head back upstairs to get another key. The key is stuck to the wall with electrical currents flowing through it, so we can't grab it unless we turn the generator off first. This room has the hardest enemy dodge in the game, and you'll get grabbed almost every time in a regular any % run. We're gonna screw open this thing on the wall, then grab the key that we would normally get electrocuted for grabbing. Now we head back to the basement, grab our 5th artifact, and it's on to the final boss. Depending on what ending of the game you get, you will either fight Incubator for the bad ending, and Incubus for the good ending. As anticlimactic as it is, Incubator actually happens to be the easiest fight in the game. It will charge a lightning attack at the beginning of the fight. This time frame of charging its attack is considered its weak point, so 4 to 6 shotgun shells spills death for the final boss for an easy 1 cycle. The amount of time it takes for the Incubator to start charging the lightning attack is also random, but is RNG manipulated for the TASs. Now we place the 5 artifacts that we've been collecting throughout Nowhere, and move on to the fight. If you have yet to guess what the final in-game time will be for this TASs in the comments, now is your final chance. And this concludes the October 2020 Silent Hill tool-assisted speedrun created by Andyrion. If you watched the entire video from start to finish, thank you so much. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone that helped make this video possible. Special thanks to Aaron, Andyrion, Borizzle, Mr. McSqueezy, Plywood, and Punchy for helping me with the script, explaining the glitches to me, the bosses, introducing me to the map viewer, and more. Also thanks to Gyromancy for creating the map viewer so I could get some sick opening shots. If you want to follow Andyrion, his socials are in the video description. I'm going to skip the final cutscene and credits and go right to the results screen where we see our final time, just in case you haven't played the game and want to experience the story for yourself. This TASs was actually revealed on the 24th of October live on Twitch, so I will show that version for revealing the time.
Alright guys, here it comes. The final time for Silent Hill 1 TASs. What is it? Yep. Someone actually guessed it right. 28 minutes, 45 seconds. ThaRixer got it right. ThaRixer actually got it right. Well, I owe you a gift sub. You owe me a video? Fair enough.
Thanks for watching, and special thanks to my patrons for making videos like these possible. Take care, and have a good one.